Wish of immortality. Somewhere on Earth, inside a spacious room full of high-tech medical equipment. Right in the center of this room was a high-tech hospital cot with all kinds of pharmaceutical machines attached to it, and on this comfortable cot lay a bony old man, full of wrinkles. He was faintly breathing with the help of a ventilator. With extreme difficulty, the old man opened his trembling eyelids, revealing a pair of murky pupils. The old man aimlessly stares at the white ceiling in a daze, like he is deep in thought, or he is just exhausted. I can't even remember how long I've been in this white room. A day. A year. A decade. I just remember my fear of death and then, sigh, I only had a vague memory of using my colossal wealth and influence to create this room so that I could live as long as possible. But living like this is not living at all. I can only breathe and sleep. I can't enjoy food or even water anymore. No woman, drinks, walk, talk, nothing. Friends. Yes, my friends, are they still alive? I can't even remember their faces or names, only Liam rings a bell, but I can't remember anything. Family, yes, I remember my wife died a year before I decided to create this room. After that, everything is foggy. I remember having sons, but why didn't they come to see me anymore? Well, I hope they're happy. I left enough for them to live like emperors. It would be good if I could see their faces before I met my end, though. Why do we have to die, eventually? Can't we just live forever with our loved ones? Why are lives so fragile and cheap? Why were we born if we had to die in the first place? Achieve, how much wealth we accumulate, power, status, love, betrayal, worldly pleasures, everything will eventually end with old age, and finally, we enter the embrace of death. Not in the end. Our brief journey called life will eventually end without reaching anywhere. We can either pave the way for others who come after us or do the complete opposite by doing nothing. People will replace people. Fresh memories will be made while old ones will be turned into histories. Nothing can last forever, so live to the fullest while it lasts. But if you ask a dying person's last wish, I don't know about others, but I want to live another day and don't want to die, period. Just like all those fantasies, I want to become immortal. And after experiencing the harsh reality of old age and being left alone to rot in this room while constantly living in fear of dying in the next second, I'll give up anything for it, anything. The silent plunge, but suddenly the old man noticed something strange. Wait, a moment. Why is my brain not hurting anymore? Why don't I feel sleepy anymore because of all those medicines? Before, I couldn't even awake for probably 5 minutes, and whenever I thought, my brain started to hurt, but it didn't happen this time. But, oh, my memories are becoming more evident all of a sudden. My name is Jacob Steve. But how is it even possible? Did those scientists discover some miracle drug and my son bought it for me? So, those bastards didn't forget about their old man after all, hey. Blood is indeed thicker than water. But why is everything dark? Did this drug only work on my brain but not my eyes? Sigh, it's still far better than my previous state, though. But I still have to die in the end. If not today, then tomorrow. At this moment, Jacob heard a foreign husky voice for the first time in quite a while. Very interesting. The experiment wasn't a total failure after all. This subject's new heart started beating after 10 seconds of transplant. Jacob was astonished when he heard this husky mumbling because this language was completely new and foreign, but he could understand it like it was his mother tongue. As far as he could remember, he had never learned this type of language before. He was even more puzzled about what he had just heard, though. So, they are now experimenting on me. Which bastard permitted them to treat this old man's body as a lab rat? Was it William or Ryan? Little Zane would never do this to me. Jacob fumed as he cursed his sons. These bastards even dare to change my heart without even my consideration. Damn it, just which quack is it? If I regain my consciousness, you're dead, quack. However, the following words of this same husky voice completely gobsmacked Jacob. I got this human slave at a low price, but he seemed quite resilient for being a human, and he even survived that kind of transplant. Truly a rare specimen for being a human. Jacob suddenly felt, no, he knew something was freaking wrong with this quack. Is he a mad quack? He's talking about enslaved people and humans like he's living in some fantasy. Just what kind of nut job those bastards hand me over to? Soon, Jacob felt his body again and tried to open his eyes with all this power because he wanted this nut job out of his room as quickly as possible before he really killed him. Although he thought that being dead was better than living and all, he still didn't want to die when it came to it. He wasn't ready and probably never would be. He just wanted to take every breath before his body gave up on its own and no more machines or medicine worked on him. Yet, when Jacob's eyelids were finally opened, he was astonished and in disbelief because he could see clearly, unlike before when everything was cloudy. He could see as clearly as when he was in his prime, or even more clearly. Maybe this wasn't a quack after. However, his joy didn't last long as his eyes went wide in horror because he saw his entire torso was opened like doors, and one could see every organ and blood vein clearly. Ah! Jacob shrieked at the top of his lungs before his eyes rolled upward, and he lost consciousness. So, this was Jacob Steve, an old man who died at age 116. After living on machines and medicines for 20 years, his heart finally couldn't take it and fail. Jacob didn't feel a thing because of the potent anesthetics in his system and was unknowingly reincarnated. As for his first experience in this mysterious place, he only woke up for 5 seconds before witnessing his own post-mortem, and losing consciousness because of utter pain, shock, and horror. Even if Jacob had the mentality of a century-old man and had seen pretty much everything in his past life, this was still hard to swallow. Jacob still doesn't know. It was just the start of his suffering and his undesirable, brutal journey toward the immortality he wanted so badly. Join my Discord server. URL. Wahi creators thoughts. 42 comments, 0 votes, send gifts. Reality check. After an unknown time. Jacob opened his eyes again in confusion before memories of recent events came back in mass. At first, he thought it was just a horrible dream, but when he felt his body and saw with his new clear vision again, his heartbeat instantly shot up like a rocket. He subconsciously looked toward this torso again, but his head won't move for some reason, so he used his eyes and felt relieved when he saw it wasn't open like a book anymore. But his relief was momentary when he noticed the strangeness surrounding him. First, he was completely naked and couldn't speak or move for some reason. Second, he felt pretty new, not like he remembered the old feeling. Third, he can't move his hands or feet, not even his pinky. Last but not least, and most scary, he was floating inside a glass cell filled with light blue liquid. He could only vaguely see his reflection, but not so clearly. Just what the hell is going on? Perplexed, Jacob tried to look through the transparent glass. The outside was lit with soft green light. Jacob could vaguely see a table in the center of the room. When Jacob's eyes landed on the wall right in front of his glass cell, he was shocked, and his eyes trembled in horror. There was some glass cell on the wall in front, but inside it was a creature with the head of a wild pig and the torso of a human male. I must be hallucinating. There is no damn way that thing is real. Jacob denied it wholeheartedly, without even thinking twice. He quickly shifted his focus elsewhere since he didn't want to look there again, afraid he might hallucinate. Jacob spotted small stairs going upward at the corner of the room, which was clearly a way out of his view. But he couldn't get free from whatever was holding him, no matter how much he tried, nor could he feel any kind of restraint, chains, or lock. Jacob finally gave up thinking he was indefinitely hallucinating or dreaming, as matter-of-factly. Because it was impossible to become young and magically appear in this horrible place. He was never a believer in any cult or religion. He never believed in reincarnation despite his desire for immortality. He just thought of it as a fantasy and unachievable wish which probably every living being had, nothing less, nothing more. Sigh, I'm probably about to die or already dead, and this might be one of those flashbacks before death. But why is mine like a horror movie? Jacob was perplexed. Well, it'll soon be over, and I'll cease to exist after that. Jacob lamented with a hint of unwillingness and deep sadness. Right then, Jacob heard the creaking sound of a door being opened. With squinting eyes, he looked toward those vague stairs. A trim, vague silhouette clad in a black cape entered the room. Jacob could tell this person's height was close to 4 feet. That was clearly uncommon unless this person was a child. The little silhouette took off the cape and threw it toward a little table near the stairs. Jacob still couldn't clearly see the person's face. But he didn't care since he was going to die very soon. The little silhouette suddenly noticed Jacob's glass cell and moved toward it. Jacob coolly watched this person coming closer and closer. Oh, you're awake. This person somehow noticed Jacob's opened eyes. Furthermore, his voice was exactly the same one Jacob had heard before he startled awake last time. Sigh, why is this quack in my flashback? I never seemed to offend any doctor's psychopath in my life, Jacob sighed bitterly. The little person suddenly extended his finger toward something beside Jacob's glass cell, and all the blue liquid sank toward the bottom while the glass cell holding Jacob slowly became empty. Jacob could finally see somewhat clearly when the blue, slimy liquid was gone. He could tell he was standing on the metallic surface, but he still couldn't move his face or anything, as a matter of fact. Suddenly, the glass tube also started to slide downward. It was clearly opening. Now Jacob's eyes finally landed on the tiny figure, and the moment it happened, his entire body shuddered as his eyes contracted with horror. Little person's face was utterly brown, with a 5-centimeter-long knife-like nose, a pair of green eyeballs and black pupils, long pointy ears, and sharp, sinister greenish fangs showing through its mouth. It was completely bald, with only a strand of black hair right in the center of its head. Jacob wanted to swear, but his damn mouth just refused to open. His death flashback was becoming more and more accurate and ghastly. I don't like the way how you look at me, slave. The little monster snorted coldly as his greenish eyes shimmered mysteriously. Kneel. Jacob, who was still thinking this was just a horror show before his death, finally felt something that one could not have felt if they were dead or dreaming. Pain. When the word, kneel, came out of the little monster's mouth, Jacob felt intense pain in his brain before his whole body trembled and his knees bent without his control or will. Bang. A loud sound of bones hitting the hard steel resounded in the room. Jacob's feelings changed between bewilderment, horror, disbelief, and intense pain in his knees. His kneecaps were nearly shattered when his body kneeled without his concern. HMPH. Now, that's better. A slave should always act like this. The little monster sneered when he saw Jacob's body shaking, and his face turned pale, which was still expressionless. Jacob somehow snapped out of his stupor, and all those moments flashed past his eyes. Foreign language, his sudden, bloody, awakening, then being in that glass cell in that slimy blue liquid, and finally mysteriously forced to kneel by this strange talking monster. Everything pointed out in one direction that he had never believed in his life before, but all this thing was forcing him to think about it, and it was probably the only answer to his billions of questions. Reincarnation. 4 comments, 0 votes, send gifts. Bloodstorming bug. Reincarnated. Right now, Jacob's mind was struck by lightning and turned into a mess. Everything was happening too fast for him to process, and his recent experiences after his transmigration made things more complicated. Jacob read transmigration genre novels and shows in his old days, but he always sneered since this was nothing but fantasy in his eyes. Besides, he never had much time for all these side activities, and only after retiring did he enjoy some movies and books. But now, these fantasies have become absolute reality, and it doesn't seem pretty either. According to this little monster, he was enslaved, and this little ugly thing was his master. Furthermore, this little monster can somehow control his every action. Just his disability of not being able to move was solid proof of it. Hell, he can't even speak. Calm down, Jacob, you are someone who conquered the world's entire weaponry industry, so conquering his little monster should be a piece of cake for you. Furthermore, look at the bright side. You gain another life. Jacob somehow calmed himself, but he was only collected on the surface while his heart was on the verge of exploding. He was elated when he thought about his second life. His peculiar situation didn't seem quite optimal for his little second life. I need more information. But how? I can't speak, and this little brown bastard didn't seem friendly at all. Jacob carefully looked at the little monster, who was coldly staring at him with greenish eyes. Now that you're disciplined, that's the result of the first transplant. The little monster's ugly face suddenly turned excited when he mentioned the first transplant. Go lay down on the table straight. He ordered Jacob while he went toward all those strange tools resting on a large rusty steel tray connected to the old steel table. Those tools also seemed quite worn out. Jacob stood up like an obedient dog and did as he was told. He lay down on the steel table, which was only a little longer than his height, with an expressionless face. Damn it, the feeling of being controlled is not good in the slightest, especially when you are controlled by an ugly monster, not by a pretty woman. Just how is he controlling me? Jacob had never felt so helpless in his entire life. He finally understood just how much control that little monster had over him. He suspected that thing wanted him to commit suicide. His bee wouldn't even hesitate to slit his own throat. The little monster picked up a scalpel-like tool, but it was more like a portable knife. After that, he made a deep 2-centimeter cut right below the center of Jacob's chest. Blood started to gush out, but the little monster didn't seem to care. Then, he took a long metallic tube with both sides open like a metal pipe and stabbed it in the cut, and Jasab's body trembled slightly. Fuck you, bastard. At least use some anesthesia, and are those things even sterilized? Jasab was swearing in pain and concern as he felt the metal tube going deeper inside the cut. After the little monster was satisfied with the metal tube placement, he opened the cover of the small red bag hanging around his neck. From inside, he took out a small green vial. Jacob was gawking at the little green vial with pain, and he suddenly had a terrible feeling about this, and just as he suspected, the little monster opened the lid and picked up a tweezer from the tray. The tweezer slowly entered the vial and started to rise. Jacob was seeing this scene in slow motion. He knew whatever was going to reveal. He won't like it in the least bit. Suddenly, Jacob's pupils dilated in horror as his body started to shiver subconsciously. The tweezer was holding a strange gray bug when it exited from the green vial, which was half a centimeter in size. The little monster seemed to like Jacob's reaction, as he wore a sinister smile. He waved the tweezer holding the gray bug at Jacob and said, "This is a bloodstorming bug. Don't worry. It won't create a storm inside your body, but, the moment it enters someone's bloodstream, it goes straight toward the heart and forces its host's blood to circulate quickly. The fascinating thing about this bloodstorming bug is it can circulate blood at the speed of lightning, but it was just a theory since no one survives that long, even to this day. Furthermore, you know what its fuel or its food is. The little monster wore an extremely sinister smile as he answered his own question. It feeds on its host's heart. Jacob's body quivered even more as blood trickled all over his chest from the cut. What the fuck is he trying to do with that sinister bug? After hearing the explanation, Jacob wanted to fight this brown fuck to death. However, he has no doubt this little bastard was not saying all this to intimidate him. That ugly sadistic smile was enough to tell he was speaking the absolute truth. Now, I'm going to send this bug toward one of your major heart veins with this tube, and if my last transplant was a success, then you don't need to worry. This bug would instantly crawl back, and if it wasn't a success, then, sigh, I have to find a new test subject, number 226, or was it 229? What a hassle. The little monster sighed helplessly when discussing the hassle of finding a new slave. He clearly didn't care about Jacob at all. 226. Just how many people has he killed before? It's over for me. Two tears flowed from Jacob's eyes as they became immediately listless just thinking about the death toll. He never thought he would somehow reincarnate and meet with this brown devil. Now, he was about to die again, and he wondered if he would get another chance again at life like this. At this moment, the little monster finally dropped the bloodstorming bug inside the metal tube with deep anticipation in his cold green eyes. Jacob's listless eyes suddenly opened wide as his entire eyeballs became visible, and blood covered his white eyeballs. He felt something drilling into his bones, as the sensation alone made him wish he were dead. 4 comments 0 votes send gifts. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Wahi. Download app now. Survive. Jake's entire body was shaking as cracking sounds came from his hands and feet because they were in the same position. After all, some mysterious power was holding them in one place, which goes against the nature of the human body. Blood started to trickle from Jacob's orifice after 10 seconds, especially from his eye sockets. The little monster coldly looked at the metal tube, completely ignoring Jacob's condition, as his only concern was the reaction of bloodstorming bug. This little monster's name was Decker, and he was an imp goblin. He has killed many people in the same type of experiments, and none of them was human before. Most of his experiment subjects died in the first phase of transplants, which was to change the heart of a living being with another one. Only experiment subjects were made in the testing phase, and Jacob was one of them. Unfortunately, no one survived this phase because bloodstorming bugs always ate their new hearts and caused them a painful and gruesome death. Decker only bought Jacob out of curiosity and desperation. Furthermore, he was cheap and had never experimented on a human before. Decker wanted this experiment to be successful because there was too much at stake for him, even his insignificant life. As he watched Jacob reacting in the same way as the other subjects and almost on the verge of exploding, he shakes his head in disappointment. He knew this one was also a lost cause. Because if the first transplant was successful, then the bloodstorming bug was supposed to leave Jacob's body in 20 seconds, and 15 seconds were already passed. The longest someone survived from bloodstorming bug was 30 seconds, and if the person hosted by a bloodstorming bug didn't take the cure to kill the bug between this time, they're doomed. Please, just kill me. Jacob only had this thought in mind at this moment as he felt his heart stabbed with small knives every second. He never would have dreamed he would be transmigrated as a slave of some sadistic psycho and die in this tortuous manner. With deep resentment and pain, he felt his previous life was too good. Even though he lived for short 100 years, he still lived like an emperor after success in the business world. At least that world had rules and laws. Most importantly, only humans were the dominating species, and they controlled everything. But here, everything was too strange. This monster could control him with thoughts, and these peculiar bug creatures also seemed too normal here. Jacob felt his consciousness fading away slowly as the pain started to lessen bit by bit. He felt immense relief at finally being free from this pain in this strange world, which he didn't even get the chance to see. No more. Jacob's consciousness descent into darkness. Decker saw Jacob's body stop moving, his breathing almost non-existent, and his discontent grew. Did I do all that for nothing? Is this journal even real? Decker mumbled in depression. I think it's all happening because all those test subjects were from mere low races, and I need to find a new powerful slave from a superior race to become completely insured. But those races are too protective of their kin, and those slave traders don't dare to extend their hands toward them. Decker mused as his face shone with desperation. He just refused to believe this journal was just a hoax. After a while, Decker snapped out of his thoughts and looked toward Jacob, and his depressed expression suddenly turned into a shocked one. With disbelief written all over his ugly face, he flashed his little brown finger under Jacob's bloody nose. What? Decker couldn't help but shout out loud when he felt Jacob's warm faint breath. He survived. But where is Bloodstorming Bug, then? My connection with it also cut off without me being noticed. So what the hell is going on? Decker's eyes shone with ecstasy as he hastened toward the metal tube, pulled it out from Jasab, and threw it in a water tray. He quickly opened a small pocket of his bag hanging around his neck, took out a small dark yellow round pill, and opened Jacob's mouth before throwing it inside. The tiny tablet instantly dissolved in his throat. Decker didn't stop there and hastily picked up a knife-like scalpel and started to cut out his left chest without caring that Jacob might die from blood loss. Hell, it was already a miracle he was breathing right now. However, Jacob's breath became steady after Decker fed him the mysterious pill. Decker paid little attention, as if he expected this to happen, and opened his left breast until he reached the sternum, where he could see his slowly beating heart. If Jacob saw his heart, he would be shocked silly because it wasn't red but completely blue. Decker was stunned when he saw a perfect, beating heart. But, then, excitement shone on his face. It seemed the Bloodstorming Bug died and did not survive like it was supposed to. He reached an astonishing conclusion. It was entirely out of his expectation. Because the Bloodstorming Bug can't be killed without a particular poison, and it was the first time he even witnessed it. Decker inhaled sharply as he mumbled with ecstasy, so, that journal is even more potent than I thought. Ha ha ha, truly worth the risk. But I had to do 2 more major transplants with other substitute organs before trying it on myself. However, finding the organs described in the journal is almost impossible, but I can always find the second or third best for myself. I won't be using Hound Rat's heart like this human. Decker excitedly looked toward the unconscious Jacob, who was covered in his blood with sparkling eyes as if he was gawking at the priceless treasure. Since you're still valuable to me, I'll allow you to heal in green healing liquid this time. Decker shouted, Pighead, come and place this human in the healing cell again and use the green liquid this time. The monster with a wild boar head and human torso, inside another giant glass cell very close to Jacob's, suddenly trembled as its eyes snapped open and beastly pupils revealed. 3 comments 0 votes send gifts. Resolve to live. Jacob groaned in pain as his tightly shut eyelids trembled slightly and slowly opened. I'm alive, he thought with incredulity as his eyeballs moved. The sheen in his eyes dimmed slightly when he noticed the same bleak surrounding, and the only difference was that he was floating in a yellowish slimy liquid, this time not blue. The only relief was the hellish pain he felt before losing consciousness was gone. How am I even breathing in this liquid? No, wait, I'm not breathing at all, but I'm still alive. He finally noticed this strangeness because there wasn't any kind of oxygen mask or anything that could help him breathe, but he was still alive. He could tell by his steady heartbeat. What a strange, cruel place, Jacob thought bitterly while vividly remembering his previous experience. Decker was no longer seen in the room, which meant he was out, which gave him some comfort, but he knew this wouldn't last long because once that brown devil came back and saw him awake, he would indefinitely start some other hellish experiment on him. Just thinking about the pain caused by bloodstorming bug gave Jacob chills. I have to think of a way to escape this place somehow, but it's impossible unless I can move my body, Jacob mused gravely. He wasn't sure if he would remain sane if he experienced that kind of torturous pain again or how much longer he could take it. That evil bastard was talking about some transplants, and he changes my heart first. Furthermore, I survived the bug test, and according to the bastard, the transplant was successful. He also mentioned killing over 200 subjects, which means I'm probably the only one who survived to this point, making me even more precious. After all, if someone is this persistent in one experiment and doesn't give up even after over 200 tries, either this experiment holds too great of importance, or the person is a sick bastard who gets kicked out of others' misery. That evil bastard is definitely the latter, but the desperation was deeply hidden in his words, and my recovery made me the first one. So now I have to observe and find what this bastard wanted so badly from these experiments. Since he likes obedience and is probably a control freak, I might as well act as he wants, and he might let his guard down. But, unfortunately, he wanted to break my spirit, so I just had to act like a listless slave who completely submitted to his tragic fate from now on. Jacob's dimmed eyes suddenly turned cold as a hint of sharpness flashed past them. He wasn't some youngster who didn't have the experience of life. He lived a whole life and dealt with all kinds of people, primarily ruthless ones who hide behind a polite smile because of his weaponry business empire. Although he never killed anyone despite being a weapon dealer, the people who died from the weapons his company manufactured were countless, and never ran from this responsibility. But his previous world was based on money, and without it, you're nothing, so he just decided to enjoy his life and rot in the afterlife, if there were any. However, now that he finally died and even reincarnated in this situation, he lamented if this was the retribution for his sins, which he had never committed by himself. But he won't just be going to stay helpless when he could change his fate, and he just needed to grab the opportunity the moment it came. Jacob closed his eyes after strengthening his resolve to leave this place alive. After an unknown time, the sound of an opening door rang in the silent room. Jacob's shut eyelids suddenly trembled, but he didn't open them and remained static. Decker was back with a big metal container in his hands and an excited smile on his ugly face. Still didn't wake up after 5 days. Decker's displeased voice entered Jacob's ear, and he remained static. However, his heartbeat wasn't as calm as his body. Your heartbeat is not with you in this act, I suppose. Decker sneered mockingly, if you keep pretending, I'll use 2 bloodstorming bugs this time. Is this evil bastard's ears that good? Jacob's heart turned cold, and he realized one of the significant flaws in his plan: he wasn't dealing with humans. Jacob didn't dare to antagonize this little devil anymore and quickly opened his eyes, but he still acted listless and fearful, which he actually was. Good, don't play any more games. You are destined to lose. But, if you act obediently, I'll give you something for your pain from now on. Decker's voice sounded sincere. But Jacob wasn't the one to believe him. He really needed me for whatever experiment he's doing. So he quickly hides his joy and only acts statically. Oh. Decker was a little astonished when he saw Jacob's eyes remain listless even after his generous offer, and thought, is he broke already? Well, what could you expect from a human? Just inflict a little pain, and they would sing their entire life story in front of you. But the pain inflicted by bloodstorming bug, rumored to be worse than 10 deaths, he survived and only lost his mind was a miracle on its own. So, why did he pretend to be unconscious before? Instinct or fear toward me? Whatever, as long as he lived through the 3rd implantation. Decker again pressed something, and after the yellowish liquid was sunk somewhere below, the old glass cell slid open, revealing naked Jacob. He had a bony body and face. He was the prime example of only skin and bones. It was as if he hadn't eaten for months, and his yellowish skin made him look highly sickly. He had shaved head, and his amber eyes were listless. His age was probably around 21 to 24, and his height was an average 1.6 meter. Even Jacob was shocked by his current condition when he vaguely saw his reflection in the transparent glass. Even when he was 96, he looked much healthier than this. 1 comments 0 votes send gifts. Blood from. Jacob does his best not to move his eyeballs and keep staring into the void like an idiot. Decker didn't even try to see if Jacob was turned into a vegetable or if he was acting. He didn't care because, in his mind, Jacob was just a test subject and slave who he could kill with just thought whenever he felt like it. However, he won't do it now because he still needs his body for further experiments and his bright future. Go, lay down in your usual position. Decker coolly uttered while he began to arrange strange equipment and other things on a table and put the large metal container in the center of the table. Jacob's eyes spasmed when he saw all those small tubes and long needles neatly arranged beside that large metal container. He very much wanted to run, but he knew this little devil wouldn't let him, nor he can move with his free will because of some mysterious power holding him in check. All he could do was remain calm and brace himself for whatever Decker had stored for him in that metal container. Since the first transplant was a complete success, it's time to move on to the second. Although it was written to wait 3 months before starting the second transplant, I think you're completely ready, don't you? Decker showed his sharp yellow teeth with his wintry smile. Jacob flinched a little while, doing his best to stare into the void as if he didn't hear anything. But his heart was on the verge of explosion because of what just Decker revealed. Although you can control your eyes quite well, you still have a long way to go if you want to control your nerves. Well, I don't mind since it doesn't matter because you can't do anything to me. Decker coldly sneered. Jacob could only sigh silently because he knew this guy wasn't a human, and he had far higher senses than humans, so it was meaningless to fool him with his chaotic emotions and without complete control over his heartbeat. However, he remained vacant and didn't do anything. He just lay there and waited for the pain. Hey, as long as you understand, I guess. Decker didn't mind Jacob's lack of reaction, and he picked 8 inches needle, which was hollow from the inside. He penetrated that long needle into Jacob's left arm. It was connected to a small glass tube, and thereby, red blood flowed from the other side of the tube and started streaming into a bucket right below. Jacob's body was frail, to begin with, and the moment his blood started to flow out of his body, he began to become dazed. Decker quickly took a small blue pill he had arranged beforehand on the table and placed it in Jacob's mouth without concern. Jacob suddenly felt the dazedness start to reduce, but the feeling of remaining empty was still there as his heart rate started to increase so that it could regenerate the lost blood. However, it was useless since the blood flow was faster than the meager regeneration. Decker scrutinized Jacob's condition, and when he saw his complexion was becoming paler and the blood flow from the needle also slowed down, his eyes flashed with excitement for some reason. Let's begin the second transplant written in that journal, the blood change. Although I don't know just which beast this blood belongs to since I collected this blood from a newly formed puddle, it's still vigorous and far more potent than human blood. I guess this was my luck since I don't have to spend any money on buying blood now. You have no idea. Just finding the auxiliary materials almost cost me 1/10 of my fortune. If you die now, I'll be very disappointed. Decker complained while bemoaning this wealth. Jacob nearly had a seizure when he thought this little devil was about to change his blood with something he had collected from a freaking puddle. This bastard definitely wanted me dead. Jacob really thought he was dead this time around. He wasn't ignorant when it came to medication. He had studied many old and modern medicines to prolong his life in the latter years of his life. Although his deep contacts, he managed to acquire all those machines and drugs that could keep him alive, he still ended up dead. The only good thing about all this was he didn't feel any pain. Anyhow, he knew changing one's blood wasn't some child's play, and it always left with many hidden side effects, nor it can be done on a fucking whim. Furthermore, this fucker didn't even care about his blood type or origin. He just wanted to pump that puddle shit into his body without caring for viruses and bacteria. Decker was utterly clueless about Jacob's thoughts. Even if he knew what Jacob was thinking, he wouldn't pay attention since he knew what he was doing, and the only thing that mattered to him was the results. Jacob's life and death had nothing to do with him. Decker opened the square container, and a potent, nasty smell suddenly wrapped the entire room. Jacob wanted to puke at this moment. Because of his wealth and status in his previous life, he lived the life of an emperor. Just when was the last time he contacted this kind of nasty smell? He doesn't remember, honestly. Nevertheless, his little bit of hope for survival instantly shattered with this nasty smell. He knew there wasn't any way he could survive if this smelly thing entered his body. On the other hand, Decker seemed utterly unfazed by this smell, as if he was used to it. He picked up a small sealed flask and opened and turned it upside down right above the opened container. Blue-powered like sand entered the container. After completely emptying this flask, he opened the second one and emptied it one by one. He emptied 12 flasks into that container. Decker started to stir it with a long needle, and after he stirred it for 10 or so seconds, red smoke began to rise from the container as if the blood inside was boiling. 3 comments, 0 votes, send gifts. Sudden mutation. Although Jacob was still conscious after Decker fed that unknown pill, he started feeling extremely drowsy because of tremendous blood loss. Even his heartbeat was becoming slower and slower. After mixing whatever he just threw inside that container, Decker picked a strange metallic ball with 2 holes on its opposite sides. He then picked a narrow tube and connected one end to one of this metallic ball's holes, which was a perfect match for this slender metal tube. Decker then mysteriously moved his thumb on his metal ball, and suddenly it started to vibrate. He nodded in satisfaction and then threw the metallic ball inside the container as well. Without delaying even a moment, Decker picked up the other side of that slender tube, connected with a long needle just like the one in Jacob's other arm. Suddenly, red liquid started to flow in drops at a languid pace, clearly the blood from that container. Decker quickly pricked this needle deeply into Jacob's right arm's deep vein. Decker's eyes flashed when he saw everything go according to his plan, and he nodded in satisfaction. He couldn't wait to see the result of this experiment because he knew if he succeeded, then there was only a third transplant left. After he succeeded with the third transplant as well, he'll be able to gather all the data he needed to ensure that these methods weren't hoaxed, and he could use them on himself without caring about any backlash or side effects. While Decker was daydreaming, Jacob, on the verge of losing consciousness, suddenly jolted from his lethargic state. He felt like boiling water was pumping right into his right arm and coursing through his veins. Jacob didn't even have the strength to think, as all his focus was on intense pain, threatening to melt his organs and vein channels. Yet, amid this scorching feeling, he felt somewhat excited from the bottom of his heart. I'm not masochistic, but why the hell I'm experiencing this weird feeling? No, something is not right. It has to be something with this shit this brown fucker is pumping into my body. Jacob was filled with dread and rage. But his old consciousness kept him sane despite all this scorching pain running wild all over his body, and that strange feeling was also helping him keep that pain in check. However, Decker didn't notice because all his focus was on Jacob's body. His pale skin was now bright red because of the heat of that unknown blood, while all his vein channels were darkly visible under his skin as if he was painted with black paint. He's still conscious despite this blood-changing process. It seemed he had built some immunity after bloodstorming Bug's experiment. Good, the more you resist, the more brilliant result I'll be able to gather. Decker was quite happy with all this development. Suddenly, the blood flowing out of Jacob's right hand stopped as the giant buck was almost full of crimson blood. Oh, his original blood runs out, but he's still conscious. Even that painless pill I gave him can't archive such a result, so it had to be something to do with the first transplant. Decker mused as he swiftly pulled out that long needle from Jacob's left hand since it served his purpose. Now, all I have to do is wait until half of the refined blood enters his body and then mix his own blood into the reaming half-blood. What a strange way of changing blood, whatever, as long as it prepared him for the third transplant. But I'm still worried if this human's body can contain this much blood. Just this container contains 1 gallon while this bucket can also contain 1 gallon, and it's almost full. So if he exploded, then this hideout would become a mess. Decker mused deeply as he kept observing Jacob. Jacob had no idea about Decker's thoughts because that strange feeling was becoming more and more apparent as the scorching pain was becoming less, which was a good thing. Yet, for some strange reason, Jacob felt this wasn't that simple, as he had vaguely sensed something was weird going on within his heart. Jacob was highly right about this because deep inside his heart was a carcass of a bug that was none other than a bloodstorming bug that had drilled into the center of his heart. However, for some unknown reason, this bloodstorming bug died right here, and it was also utterly impossible for Jacob to remain alive with this bug carcass in his heart, yet he was still alive and didn't feel a thing. At this moment, the new blood was seeping through his heart or a hound rat's heart, implanted into Jacob as his first implantation. This new blood was slowly melting the bloodstorming bug's carcass. Strangely, the melted corpse was getting absorbed by the hound rat's heart and the new blood. His heart was like a sponge that was crazily absorbing the bloodstorming bug carcass and that scorching blood, which was entirely impossible in a sense. However, it was happening. Furthermore, as the hound rat's heart was absorbing this blood, it was slowly reshaping. This hound rat's heart was in no way structured like a human heart, and it was just the closest match Decker could find in cheap. Now, however, this heart, which was somewhat significant and broader than a human heart, was shrinking, and its structure was reforming as if it was molding into a heart of a human. Furthermore, that bloodstorming bug was utterly an unexpected gift that was now merging with this newly reshaping heart. Moreover, something strange appeared right inside his heart's wall. It was too vague, but it was black. Decker did not know about this sudden mutation going on with Jacob's heart, or he'll be shocked and might have killed him instantly out of fear because this type of mutation was supposed to happen after the 4th transplantation.